reading The Learning Self, Understanding the Potential for Transformation by Mark Tennant. Mark Tennant received his PhD in psychology from Macquarie University in 1983. He is an emeritus professor of education at the University of Technology in Sydney, Australia. His academic focus has been on developing a critical understanding of psychology in its application to pedagogy with an emphasis on post-school contexts. The Learning Self is a scholarly work that discusses the development of the self with special emphasis on adult education. This book is written for educators and others in the helping professions or anyone that wants to learn more about the self. In 171 pages, Tennant looks at various theories of the self and interdisciplinary practices and techniques aimed at helping people transform themselves. The book uses academic literature, anecdotes, and fiction to make sense of the self and transformation. Starting with the chapter on the authentic self, Tennant exposes the reader to different representations and theories of the self and allows the reader to digest and process many different ideals. Tennant introduces the reader to the concepts of the self, identity, and subjectivity. He highlights Danziger's point that psychologists were not the first to conceive of the self, and that the term had been used in sociology, philosophy, literary studies, and history previously. It was John Locke that first considered the self as an object of knowledge and the source of unity. He moved away from the religious view and towards a more secular view. This opened up the self for further study. Psychologists and sociologists view identity in different ways. Sociologists see it as socially produced and malleable, while psychologists see identity as a source of continuity in a person. There was a shift from the term self to the term identity to explore the relationship between the individual and society. Identity is a more politicized term and signals the shift from the private realm to a more public realm. Psychology can be seen as a means of control and regulation as it promotes a normative self. The use of the term subjectivity represents a shift from analyzing the interior of a person to the exterior. Tennant mentions Fromm's question, how do we distinguish between authentic and inauthentic needs? This issue is especially relevant to teachers and others in the helping profession that hold authenticity at a premium. Tennant posits that an authentic learning environment has openness, trust, caring, and allows for central reflection by both learners and teachers. Kreber et al. Argue that students need self-authorship, which is an intellectual, moral, and personal complexity that supports their readiness for coping with the multiple personal, vocational, and civic challenges they will encounter after college. Self-authorship can be equated with authenticity. In the chapter on the repressed self, the author discusses Freud's concept of the id, ego, and superego, and how these relate to society. He also discusses psychoanalysis and education. While education has been thought of as oppressive, not unlike psychology, and authoritarian, it has contributed to the progressive liberation of education and the move to a more learner-centered environment. In the same chapter, Tennant discusses Frere and conscientization. According to Tennant, conscientization implies a critical awareness of the self as a subject who can reflect on the world, act on it, and transform it. We're agents of our own oppression, but also possible liberators. The last chapter focuses on recreating oneself. This represents the essence of transformation. Action is necessary for fundamental change. Counter instances or events from the past when the problem or situation was handled provide the raw material for reauthoring the self and opening up different and multiple readings of the past experiences. Thus, the seeds of the new self are to be found in the old. Tennant advocates an integrative approach to creating and recreating the self. The self can never be seen as complete and is always growing, changing, and transforming. I would like to take time to recommend this book to teachers or researchers, professors, instructors, or people that advocate social change. I believe this book will help you understand the nature of transformation and see that the self is not stagnant, it can change, and how to go about changing and how to be an effective teacher in this world.